is about bringing all of you together, the women of Croatian heritage. Women from across all industries and professions from across Australia, Croatia, even Dubai, that are all here with us today. Women who have been disengaged from the Croatian community but realise how important a heritage is in making us the strong, independent and powerful women that we are, and whatever it is that you do in your field. But mostly this weekend is important for us because what we have and what we share, we make sure we leave to the next generation of leaders as well. So we come together to learn, to be motivated and inspired, but mostly associate ourselves with other like-minded women.
Always inspired by all of you, and I have been throughout the last few years as we've engaged on the Zooms, on topics that were important to everybody, from mental health to, violence against women, domestic violence, to, beauty treatments, and you name it. I mean, we've touched it all, and I think we've grown closer, and I know for me personally, you were all a source of strength throughout what has been a very difficult time. But we are leaders in our homes, in our businesses, in our communities, in our countries, and never lose sight of that. Croatian women have your back, which is very true. And Sonia told this to the guy that was facilitating our event at Parliament House last night. He was afraid. He said, "Oh, do we need more security for the former president?" And Sonia said to him, "Are you kidding? She has 120 Croatian women watching her back. Like, why would we need more security?" If you want something done, ask a Croatian woman. And I can't keep calm. I'm a Croatian woman. I think that one really sums it up. It is my great honor to introduce the former president of the Republic of Croatia, Her Excellency, Madam President Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović.
We change and develop as circumstances change and our experiences shape us. Our priorities shift, and we need to be able to adjust to the changing landscape around us. And in time, our power becomes both personal and positional. And this is what I will be talking about as well, how to use that personal and positional power to influence the life of others as well. I must say, though, that never ever in my life have I ever felt inferior to men in any way. And never have I doubted, or as a matter of fact, as I've said, never even thought about myself, about the fact that I am a woman and that thus I should be treated in a different way, even in a preferential way. I don't want to be part of quota. I don't want to become something because I'm a woman. I want to achieve things because I'm a person. Again, with my education, with my work ethics, attitude towards others, etc. So it should all be about competence. And this is what we should be instilling in this world. So, as I said, I never looked at myself through that lens as a woman, but nevertheless, I have always felt a moral obligation, that sort of a trailblazer myself, pushing the glass ceilings, or what I prefer to say, navigating glass labyrinths. I had the duty to use my personal and positional power to pursue and promote gender equality, and as a matter of fact, actually equality of all persons. So it has always been both a major policy component of any position that I held, although I must say that women in power have to tread carefully that line in order not to be perceived as pursuing aggressively a self-serving purpose. And for me, it has also been a matter of activism and advocacy. Of course, there is statistical evidence that gender parity brings about greater development opportunities for both developed and underdeveloped countries. I could talk a lot now about the GDP that all of our countries could achieve if we had full parity, but we don't have the time for that. We can study that at a later time. And gender parity is particularly important in areas written by conflict, but you see still lack of women in peace processes, which are statistically proved to have more of a success if women are involved. And even if you look at the UN, If you look at peace mediators and negotiators, it's mostly men. We often think, we're not going to send a woman because that's going to antagonize the other side of society that does not accept women, and that is completely wrong. And I must tell you from my experience in Afghanistan, I had no difficulties talking to the Taliban or the former Taliban, because in a way, of course, they did not perceive me as an Afghan woman, they perceived me as a Western woman, but they did show that respect that you have to garner through your attitude and through that respect that you show even when you heavily disagree, and try to find a way forward on the common language. So translating this into concrete policy action as Minister of Foreign Affairs and later as President and at NATO, I always took part that gender equality and fighting for women, peace and security was always a very important aspect of what I did. And Betty will remember how hard we fought, first of all, for the representative for women, peace and security, for that position to be established with NATO, but also to send gender advisor to commander of our operations in Afghanistan, and we actually managed to appoint a Croatian female general as the first gender advisor with ISAF. I also brought delegations of Iraqi and Afghan women to Croatia to talk to their counterparts. At the time of the Iraq crisis, the mayor of Vukovar was female, and that showed how involvement of women in peace processes, why we were successful, because although we did not achieve parity in our peace processes in Croatia, nevertheless women had a disproportionately important role in all of that.
Good morning, everybody, and it's my great privilege to introduce the panel members for our first panel today, Foundations for the Future. So if you can kindly welcome our panel guests, and I'll invite them to the stage now. Angela Jeffrey, Dr. Jasna Novak-Milic, Katarina Veljača, and Tanya Tandora. Please give them a warm welcome.
For work, I get to lead as the project director $11 billion worth of 23 kilometres of driverless metro from St Mary's to a new city. Probably hasn't ever been delivered to that scale since Canberra. You choose a career path that you are passionate about, and you be yourself. And part of being yourself is your heritage, where you come from. For me, my upbringing with my parents. So that's always really been at the heart of the decision making of what projects I deliver and where I choose to spend my time. What leading like a woman for me means, and it's about being authentic. That notion before of you choose what you love to do and you be yourself. And on the next slide, authenticity for me is being credible. So I'm a project director. I was born to be a project director. I do it with full ferocity. I own it. I don't shy away.
I'm Croatian, born and raised in Croatia, in Zagreb, on outskirts of Zagreb, where I actually met and married my Aussie Croatian husband. They call me an import, and I don't mind. My dream job came with enormous shoes to fill. I inherited a legacy of 40 years of hard work, invested in establishing and maintaining Croatian studies in Australia, the only such program in the Southern Hemisphere. No pressure, right? My job description changed drastically because I was primarily a teacher and researcher, as now I had to work with university management, with governments and government officials, with community leaders, and everything being done in a language that's not my own. I had to manage projects, negotiate budgets and academic programs, lobby against course and program cuts, exhibit entrepreneurial and marketing skills in promoting the university and what we do, and basically fight for every single student. And all this in parallel with the COVID pandemic as it started to unfold. We have so much to offer, so much culture, history, and so much knowledge. Wonderful scientists. Send your children to Croatian schools if you can. Teach them about your Croatian culture and history. Respond to research, please, about Croatian community and language. encourage young people to enroll into diploma at Macquarie. We're fully online. Encourage them to go and study in Croatian. There's some really wonderful opportunities out there.
I was born in Split and I migrated with my parents to Australia in 1987 due to political pressures. I was 4 years old at the time. My mum was pregnant with my brother, and with all of 2 suitcases, we arrived in Adelaide to our awaiting family. Personally, what I've loved most about my career in mining has been the opportunity it's given me to work across different disciplines. While I started in production operations at Olympic Dam, I subsequently spent time working in technology, and most recently, I've spent the last 5 years or so working on various organisational transformation programs, from remote operations centres to currently a global lean transformation. Mining and the processing of minerals have been essential to the progression of the human race. Mining has taken us from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age. It's provided the sources of energy that we needed to fuel the Industrial Revolution, and it's essential to our modern society. You can see here how the copper that is mined at operations like at Olympic Dam makes a difference for people's lives. And that's why for me it's not hard to find purpose in what I do every day, and I would encourage you all to consider mining as a pathway for yourselves and for the women in your life.
In the 70s, my parents moved to Australia and they had 2 absolutely delightful children. Me with the weird career of left field roles that are often very elaborately job titled and almost impossible to translate into Croatian every single time. And it's sort of ironic really, because what I've actually built my career on is making digital relatable for everyone. And that's where Her Excellency Betty Pavlich handed me a massive favour earlier today when you said, I'm just not that technologically savvy. If you have ever uttered that sentence in your career, my talk is for you. You're who I want to talk to today. Because that's exactly what I think lifts the watermark for everyone. And it's never too late to get comfortable and get started. So that's the focus of the foundations that we're going to be setting today, is the foundations for your career and giving you the confidence to move forward. In my role at Tennis Australia, I'm the head of digital strategy for tennis participation. And what that means in practice is working with tennis clubs, coaches, professionals or volunteers, everything in between, and helping them get their products and services offered online with the end goal of more people playing tennis. And despite COVID, we've actually had a cracking couple of years. I think also everyone being at home meant that people could sort of focus on those things that they hadn't had time for previously. So not only do we have dramatically more tennis being offered online, we also have more people playing tennis. The most important thing is digital is customer experience. And customer experience is something that every single one of us experiences constantly, every day. So in your role, in your career, whatever that might be, when you want to get closer to your customers, when you want to find new opportunities for revenue, when you're faced with tricky feedback that you don't understand, go back to the start. Experience what your customers are experiencing. Find a way, however clunky it is, it doesn't matter, and it absolutely doesn't have to be perfect. Document that journey, and then you start to really unravel some bigger insights that get beyond what colour that button is when I clicked it. It's like, oh, this is actually now looking at it with my customers' eyes who don't see arbitrary silos between things.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the second panel today, Leading in Challenging Times, and I think we're all adept at that over the last couple of years, and we thought maybe that we were having a bit of a break from that, but it doesn't appear so at the moment. So I would like to introduce our 4 panellists for this session. First of all, Dr. Betty Domazet from the DOMA Group, and also a Senior Emergency Specialist Physician. Welcome, Dr. Our second panellist is Elizabeth McKinnon, a criminal defence lawyer. Welcome, Elizabeth. Our third panellist, Marianne Petkovic, a non-executive director and advisor. Welcome, Marianne. And Mary Kovacevic, if you're here, Drive to Survive, an entrepreneur.
I'm a senior emergency medicine specialist here at the Canberra Hospital. That's my normal job. I have a couple of other little gigs. I'm a board member of Directions, which is an amazing organisation. It's all about harm minimisation for drug and alcohol addiction. I'm a medical specialist for organ donation in Australia, and I sit on the Australian College for Emergency Medicine Committee for Mental Health. Today I'll be talking about my family's business, DOMA. So a bit of background. My father, Ivan, came from Bieli. It's a small village in Dalmatia. My grandfather used to joke that the only brief for Bieli planning was to make sure that the roads were wide enough for two donkeys to pass by without kicking each other. So having driven there, all I can say is they must have been very small donkeys because that brief was never followed. So tiny, tiny, tiny village, but punches way above its weight. I'm always been in awe of how many success stories have come from that region and that area. So back to the story. Dad left home at the age of 15. He trained as an apprentice glazier in Dubrovnik for 1 or 2 years and then ran over the Slovenian-Austrian border like so many of his peers did at the same time. He ended up in Australia in the mid-1960s. He took up house painting, saved $150 for a deposit on his first block of land, $150. Built his first house and then moved on from there. In 1974, my father Ivan formed a company called, wait for it, Ivan Homes, and then jumped wholeheartedly into building single standing houses. He moved into the higher stakes of multi-unit residential complexes and then followed that with his first hotel. My brother joined the company in 1988. Ewart had finished a Bachelor of Commerce and Law here at the ANU and then cut his teeth working with some private banking and private law firms here in Canberra before joining Dad. Together, they've built on some really strong foundations that were set. They've diversified big time. And very importantly, they've spent a bit more time coming up with a better name for the company, DOMA. And as I've listened to all these stories, I think the 3 critical success factors are the same across everyone's industry and everyone's career. The first one is hard work. The time most of our parents came out to Australia were times of great opportunity. So there was no doubt there was a bit of being in the right place at the right time. But in the early days, there was a huge risk in putting everything on the table and rolling that dice. So to be successful, it had to be backed with a huge amount of hard work. And I know for DOMA, it's been a constant amount of hard work ever since to keep things growing. I think it's safe to say most of our parents have come from poor migrant backgrounds, where there was no or very little education. But they've all had a burning desire to work hard and to take that opportunity by the horns. And I think it's also probably safe to say that looking around the room and listening to everyone's story, but hard work has been a big part of how you all got to where you've got to. The second critical success factor is agility and innovation. I sometimes look at my 15-year-old son and wonder who in their right mind leaves their home at that age, goes to a country they know nothing about, without money, without language, and without knowing what's waiting for them. To then pick yourself up, adjust to new opportunities, dust off the adversities, and move upwards and onwards is pretty impressive. Since those early days, there's been plenty of time since when DOMA's had to readjust, to tweak, or to completely reinvent. And don't even get me started on the last 2 years of COVID. We've all been smashed, but I think the construction, the hospitality and the hotel industry were particularly spanked. It's just the gift that keeps giving, that COVID. So I think seizing every opportunity evolving and innovating is a key critical success factor. And the last one, I think, is loyalty. I know Croatians are known for a profound loyalty. Loyalty to their families, to their friends, to their colleagues, to their origins, to their beliefs. To me, loyalty is making sure you've acknowledged everyone you've come across on your way and that you've helped and supported as many of those people as you possibly can, so that everyone around you knows that your word is worth gold and that you lift as you've climbed. And that's why DOMA is immensely proud to be a partner organisation to this summit. My father loves reading the list of who comes to these meetings. He sits there, has a read of what everyone's doing, sits back and starts bragging about how far and how well Croatians have come. He's that proud you'd think you were all his daughters. Congratulations to everyone on your successes. Thank you again for all making the effort to come to beautiful Canberra. And special thanks to Betty and Sonia for coming up with the idea of these summits, and more importantly, for keeping the momentum going.
I went to a public school that we had a lot of migrants at the school. I went to a school that was very disadvantaged. We had a very low pass rate for VCE. A lot of the kids, their parents worked in factories, and my parents worked in factories. I have a working class background, and it's something that that I'm very respectful of and that I'm proud of. I grew up with, and I'm not going to keep going on about it, with unfairness, racism, absolute classism, and that is what drew me ultimately to being a lawyer, and in particular to being a defence lawyer. I am a criminal defence lawyer, and I represent people that are accused of committing crimes. Some are women, believe it or not, and some, or a lot, are men. So my advice is, be yourself. You're a woman, you're strong, you're of European background, you're Croatian. You can't get any tougher than that. People get scared when you say you're Croatian. I love that, right? And just be powerful, and you'll be able to cut through all the nonsense. You'll have an air of authenticity, and just remember that be what you want your daughters to be, or your nieces to be, and be proud.
I think for me to talk about my career in banking and finance, and certainly leading in a very challenging time, really then had to think about a couple of things that will, resonate and come from my family. Education was really important to us. My dad didn't have that opportunity. Part of the reason that I kept Perkovic as my surname was to respect my parents, who worked very hard to educate us, and equally to ensure that we have diversity in Australia. Two most important assets for Australians are retirement. At retirement is going to be their home and their superannuation assets. And as a woman, more than half of women, that are retirees actually end up retiring on the government pension. Our life expectancy is longer than our male counterparts, and we are generally more conservative. Not only that, but through our working careers, the pay gender gap is just significant. We have to leave the workforce to raise children, and all of these things, and coupled with that is, really poor financial literacy skills. So I thought, if my dad had taught me, financial independence is really important, I'm about to embark into a career in financial services as a woman, where the odds are against me for actually succeeding because of two things. One is lack of diversity, and that's not just gender, just general lack of diversity. The second component was those statistics of being a female.
It was a very technical and complex industry. It was hard for people to understand, and importantly, it was just not accessible. Advice and understanding kind of money and all of that was really difficult to understand.
I fell into this job because when I was in my early 20s, my dad got very ill. He passed away at the age of 53, and I sort of felt it was my duty as his half daughter, half son, to keep him proud, and continue on with the love of my job. I realised that I did love truck driving, and Dad had no choice, because as much as he didn't want me to drive, my boyfriend wanted to learn, and Dad always wanted that boy in the family. So he was too ill to go with him, so off we go. Dad started here at Parliament House and with Fraser, the first shovel, and then we took over with Roach Constructions from Melbourne. Being a contractor, they didn't discriminate. A lot of people did, but Dad was good with the boss. So I didn't take over his company because he had no company, but I took over his good name and his ethics. So apparently I was always put up front, because they said if they put Mary up front, all the rest of the trucks will keep up with her. Because you can't let a woman look better than the blokes. I specialise in what they call these Road Ranger 18-speed non-synchro gearboxes. It's every guy's dream to drive one, because you got to do medal gas. So it's a little bit of... I had to ask my mother before she passed away. I said, Mama, I've got a guy from the war from Croatia. He can't speak English, but I've got to help him and teach him. They've got opportunities here. And I have to teach him in Croatian, and I'm scared, that my language isn't that good. And she said, does he understand you? I said, yes, he does. But I said, I felt a bit embarrassed when I didn't know how to say double clutching, because I was there going, dva puta, upri. And I'm going, It was... And Mum goes, ajme, meni sram te bilo, to trebala si reći međugas. And I go, I have never forgotten that word, because as Europeans, we move with our hands and our body, and the truck's moving, and this guy's looking at me. But look, he really appreciated it, He was a lot braver than me. He was a lot braver than me to just even have me sitting there beside him, because the scars that he could show, actually scars that I have only seen in movies, really was an eye-opener. And when one of the Canberra buses comes towards us, we were training at the AUS, he goes, putsa you. And I'm going, oh my God. So that bus became like a tank to him. He had a lot of, mental injuries there that was hard. It is hard, and it's hard to teach someone like that where their brain's somewhere else. But look, we found the good side of it, and he went quite well. And then he moved to Melbourne.
So let me welcome the first speaker. So Julie Stefania.
10 years ago, I wanted to, wear stylish activewear. I have to admit, I love fashion, and my mum will attest to that. Even when I was 5 years old, I was like dreaming of beautiful labels. I don't know why, it was just something I grew up with. And so I wanted cool activewear, and I just could not believe how daggy it was, to be honest. I was shopping at beautiful fashion stores. Why did this not exist when I wanted to go to the gym? So I basically decided to start this business with my sister. And if you're an entrepreneur, particularly if you're a first-time entrepreneur, or if you're starting in a field which you have no experience in, which I didn't, my only experience in retail was on the shopping side. It is a bit like, I've heard the analogy, it's like jumping off a cliff and then learning how to fly. You've got no idea what you are doing, but you start it, and then immediately all of the problems hit you, and you need to think every single day, how do I solve this? When we first applied to have Adidas by Stella McCartney, which 10 years ago was the pinnacle in activewear, it is run by the legendary Stella McCartney. She had to approve it herself. We were the first online-only store in the world to get that label on. She had to look at our little old site, and she actually loved it and said she approved it. So that was a night we went out and had drinks. There was a team of 4 of us. We went out and put the drinks on work. That was a fun day, it was huge for us. Thank you. Another pinch myself moment was that I actually was very gratefully awarded the Young Retail Entrepreneur of the Year at the World Retail Awards. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it's kind of like the Oscars in retail. So Tommy Hilfiger was there at that award ceremony winning a Lifetime Achievement Award. So it's full of the world's biggest brands, and they have this one little category for the up-and-comers, and I won that award. So again, amazing to see, where I've come from, riding that donkey in the cellar,
to, you know, sharing a room with Tommy Hilfiger and winning an award. And probably another one that, you know, I'd reflect on is that the Nike board flew us to Portland to the Nike HQ about 5 years ago. So probably in our infancy, we're like 3 or 4 years old. And they said, we think you're doing women's sportswear better than anyone in the world. And that came out of the Nike board members' mouths. So we were kicking ourselves under the table, me and my twin sister. So it was full of lots of pinch myself moments. And that doesn't come without a lot of hard work. But so if you are starting a business, the likelihood is there are already people in the space and you're doing something different. You have to focus on that element of difference. So for us, it was about the femininity. I mean, we were probably the first people to tissue wrap sportswear. It'd never been sold that way. You'd get it in a plastic bag. So we, you know, really played on that element of differentiation. So think about what your point of difference is. It is going to make you stand out. It is cheaper, more cost effective, and more effective. It will make it, you know, a difference to your audience. Focus on that differentiation.
Next, I'd like to welcome Christina Zanic.
I was really fortunate enough to move on from Adelaide, you know, to leave home. You know, I don't know if most of you had that. My dad and mum just didn't understand the fact I want to go live in the city and have my own place. But they were like, well, you can't do that. So I had to leave Australia. So that was the easiest way to do that. So I left Australia. I went to the UK. I worked and lived there for about 4 years, which was really fantastic. And then I got an opportunity to go to Bangkok, and I just remember calling my mother, and I don't know, maybe some of you ladies will know because you're sort of my age, but my mother said to me, I said to her, I'm going to go to Bangkok, I have an opportunity. And my mother said, oh my God, didn't you see that movie with Nicole Kidman? It's called Bangkok Hilton. And I'm like, she goes, oh my God, drugs and things, why are you going there? So anyway, I spent the next 20 years of my life in Bangkok. I started my own design firm. By the time I finished that, I had 450 people. We had 10 offices in 14 offices in 10 different countries, and I grew this business of interior design, and you know, I just kind of love it. So now I left my business. I had some ups and downs, as we all do, but I left my business and I started my business again 10 years. I'm in Dubai and I'm working over, we have 115 odd people and we're working in 20 countries now. One of our big wins last year, we got Company of the Year and I got Design Leader of the Year in Dubai and the Middle East. And I feel very proud of that because, you know, I've always been one of those people who don't really want to be in the limelight, and I kind of enjoy just letting things happen and it works. And we've always been these quiet achievers, but actually we've done always some really fantastic work. So I kind of am very proud of that achievement from last year. And just some of the works, thank you. One of my mottos is you have to hire people better than yourself. And if you do that, you'll always compliment the things that you can do. So, you know, I really love giving that opportunity to women. I hire women who've had a career, who've had to go out and have a baby. They want to come back, but they have to look after their baby. So I have about 5 women in my office who work on a part-time basis. They come in, they still get that sort of drive and that passion of design, which we do. So that's really kind of nice, and I really love giving back in that way.
I'd like to introduce Mariana Rudan.
For as long as I can remember, going back to when I was just a kid, the only thing I ever chased were experiences. And all from the moment I knew how to write, I'd record all those experiences down in journals. When I left high school, I was accepted into the communications program at Bathurst, but my parents hit the roof. Why Bathurst? We have to pay for your food and accommodation. Sydney has loads of universities, pick one. You're not moving out of home. And that was that. I was gutted. I didn't have the marks for comms for UTS or Macquarie. Eventually I studied politics and Italian at Sydney University. I got that Italian in. At age 22, I noticed an ad in the Saturday Herald, Italian airline seeking flight attendants for a 12-month contract, work base Milano. I screamed like I'd won the lottery when they called to say I got the job. Take that, mum, not Bathurst, Milano. The contract was only 12 months, but I had the time of my life. Our main route was Milan JFK, which meant I spent almost as much time in New York as I did in Milan. When it ended, I wasn't ready to come home. I hadn't lived the true Italian lifestyle, as I was always flying. So I studied. I gained a TESOL certificate qualification teaching English as a second language, and I got a job at the British Institute in Piazza Gadorna and taught English to Italians. One night while at the gym, I told my best friend Alessandra that it was time for me to pack up and go home. She almost fell off the treadmill. No way, you haven't given it your best shot yet. As we left the gym that evening, she accosted Stefano, a TV executive who was on his way out the door with his Louis Vuitton gym bag in tow. Stefano, she said, this is my talented friend Mariana. Do you know of any music producers who might be able to help her? She really didn't want me to go. Stefano gave me his card and told me to ring him. A few days later, I met Stefano for lunch. Can you host? He asked. What do you mean? We're looking for a presenter who can host a stage with singers, comedians, fashion parades across 4 days during the Festival of Sanremo. It's in a small square just outside of the Arston Theatre. Canale Italia is sponsoring the stage. We need someone to host. Do you want to audition? Sure, I said. Within a week, I'd secured the gig. I hosted the event program, then on the night of the finals conducted Vox Pops for Canale Italia's English program on Saturdays. After that experience, I had an epiphany. I was going to work in television. So off I went back home with my showreel of work, determined to get a job in television. 3 months after returning, my brother was at a press conference speaking to Andy Pascalides. He was looking for a female reporter for Football Stars of Tomorrow, a program which aired on Fox Sports and SBS. You won't believe how hard it is to find a female reporter who can write, has a good voice and knows football, said Andy to the group. I know someone, said my brother. He called me immediately. Look, it's not music or arts or travel, it's football. What do you think? What do I think? I reflected back on all the match reports I'd written as a teenager in my journal. Are you crazy? Within a month, I was working as a reporter for Football Stars of Tomorrow. At the end of that whole season of episodes, I got a call from the executive producer of sport at SBS. He said he liked my stories and my voice, and he wanted me in for a screen test. They were looking to hire a female on the World Game Show. That female was me. Unlike sport, news is dark and heavy. Most of the stories were depressing. How was I contributing to the world by reading the top lines of depressing news stories in a fancy dress with a made-up face? I wasn't out there sourcing the stories, and if I were, I sure as hell would have sourced more uplifting ones. So I set up Inside Optimist Media with the aim of telling stories that engaged and uplifted people instead of promoting the doom and gloom. I began by asking the simple question, what makes us happy? And decided that I was going to find out by going to Denmark, because Denmark consistently rated as the happiest nation on the planet. So I researched for 4 months, made many phone calls and got on a plane to Denmark with a cameraman.
So Emma has kindly agreed to actually go through the slides and give Tanya's story.
Tanya works in Croatia, so she's from Canberra, but she is in Croatia, and she has the most amazing story. So Tanya is basically the queen of digital nomads. Do you know what a digital nomad is? Does anybody know? Yes? So somebody who picks up their laptop and lives this amazing lifestyle working remotely. And I think if Tanya could give you one message, it would be this. You can do it, and you can do it in Croatia. And don't hesitate. So Tanya started her business Saltwater in March of 2017. Tanya opened her first co-working space in 2017 and thought she'd see how it goes, as she was working remotely already and she didn't want to be alone in her apartment. I'm sure we can all relate. We've all been working from home lately, and it's sort of nice when you've got another body next to you keeping you company. Arriving in Split, knowing only one person, she now has people reach out to her, and she works with local businesses, including Croatian diaspora who run this hostel, which converts to a co-work over winter. There are local meetups that are now a mainstay, as many people from out of town are looking for a chance to network, and there have been literally hundreds of people attend these events over the years.
Okay, so our next panel is for the well-being of our communities. So I would love to invite the following panelists to come up. So Anastasia McKinnon, Dr. Angela Rezo, I don't know if that's just, Dr. Nevenka Tadic, and Susie Vlahovic.
My union that I work for, the United Workers Union, we look after industries of mostly lower paid workers, so security, cleaners, warehousing, and predominantly lower income industries, but it's quite a big union with almost 150,000 members across all sorts of fields. So what I do as an organiser is I help to protect and promote the interests of working people. And so that can be anything from helping individuals to understand their rights at work, but also negotiating enterprise agreements for groups of workers, and also things like trying to change policy and meeting politicians and stuff to get better outcomes for our members.
Left Canberra to go to UNSW to study medicine. One of my greatest fears, I wasn't going to share this, but I thought I would actually, because I think it's important to reflect the role of men in our lives. So when I was leaving and going to study medicine, my dad didn't want me to go, he wanted me to stay in Canberra. But more than that, he was scared that this great education of mine would make me unmarriageable. I studied medicine, and I was during medical school you're allowed to do electives, and I did an elective in Croatia. I decided to do paediatrics. As much as I love children, I love peds, the reason I chose it was because I thought my language skills were better with like 3-year-olds than talking to adult patients. So finished my degree. After my internship, I was really keen to get back to Croatia. For many years, I was toying with moving over there just shortly after the war, and really wanted to make a contribution and live in Croatia. So through many of my different connections, I managed to secure a job in Dubrovnik Base Hospital as an intern, and worked in the basement of the hospital because the old hospital was bombed during the siege. And so we lived and we worked actually in the basement of the new Dubrovnik Hospital. So I went from one of the most beautiful coastal cities in the world to work in one of the most beautiful foggy cities in the world, in Edinburgh. So I worked in Edinburgh for a year and then came back to Australia to complete my training in radiation oncology. And each of those dots represent one woman like that person and their survival at 10 years. And so then we can sort of estimate and say to the 71-year-old with that cancer, about there's 1% extra women alive like you if they have chemo, and for the younger woman there might be 8 extra women alive because of chemotherapy. And the way that we do that is using tools like this, which is a tool called UK Predict, which is based on evidence.
So for me, it was a 15-year road, 11 years of solid university and a few basic years of general dental training in between, which was a prerequisite. Then I kept climbing, of course, and I started my own practice. Just before I did that, I went to Sydney and did further training with lingual adult orthodontics for a year. I returned to Melbourne. I did some teaching for the undergraduate program in the dental school, and then I started my own practice in the western suburbs of Melbourne, close to where I grew up. I started with one patient, subletting a room in a consulting, subletting a consulting room, and I had one patient on my very first day. I've now grown to seeing an average of about 100 patients a day, together with a team of 3 hygienists and therapists. I wear my Croatian heritage as a badge of honour. The front door in my practice is littered with yearly stickers from the priest who comes in every year to bless us all. And the Croatians with braces, when they leave, they all smile when they see the stickers because they have them at home. So my practice today is Footscray Orthodontics. I'm based in Footscray, obviously. I employ approximately 20 staff, mostly of migrant descent, 6 Croatian girls and 4 with special needs. We have a lot of work experience kids, both from high school and also the University of Melbourne and La Trobe. 4 of the high school students that we mentored have actually become dentists themselves. I have a particular empathy with patient families who have children with special needs. I have a daughter myself who has challenges and high needs. So one way I can give back is to be able to provide that treatment at no cost for these families.
I'm going to focus on Tokyo 2020 and what the Australian Olympic Committee did for the well-being of athletes and officials in Tokyo. As you know, it was a very scary time. A lot of people weren't vaccinated and we were going into the unknown. So I'll go through, based on these 5 themes of what we did to safeguard the well-being of our athletes and officials. We work with the AIS very closely, so a lot of medicos and all sorts of people to provide living quarters, in a nutshell, for the Australian team at the Games, to get them there, to put uniform in their back and all the rest of it.
much.